The House will be in order. The chair lays before the House a communication from the Speaker.
The Speaker's Rooms, Washington, D.C., November 17, 2022. I hereby appoint the Honorable Ann M. Custard to act as Speaker pro tempore on this day. Signed, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House of Representatives.
Pursuant to the order of the House of January 10, 2022, the chair will now recognize members from the list submitted by the majority and minority leaders for morning hour debate. The chair will alternate recognition between the parties, with time equally allocated between the parties, and each member, other than the majority and minority leaders and the majority whip, limited to 5 minutes, but in no event shall debate continue beyond 11:50 a.m. The chair recognizes the gentleman from California, Mr. McClintock, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, the announcement of Mike Garcia's election makes it official. The American people have entrusted Republicans with the House majority. They do so at a time of unprecedented fiscal peril for our country. 40-year high inflation, economic recession, and an approaching debt crisis, all driven by the most reckless spending in our nation's history. And history is screaming this warning at us that nations that bankrupt themselves aren't around very long. Republicans must reclaim the mantle of fiscal integrity and fiscal responsibility. And we should start by renouncing the tawdry, corrupt, and irresponsible practice of congressional earmarks, in which individual congressmen direct spending to pet projects in their districts or grants to favored supporters, bypassing merit-driven competition. Now, I propose to the House Republican Conference a rule forbidding congressional earmarks and expect to vote on it when we return after Thanksgiving. Now, earmark supporters argue that the power of the purse rests with Congress. Therefore, its elected members and not unelected bureaucrats should make these decisions. Well, no, not exactly. Representatives are supposed to be biased toward their districts. That's why Congress is designed to act collectively. Ever since Magna Carta, it's been a settled principle of good governance that the power to appropriate funds should be separated from the power to spend them. This is at the heart of the constitutional separation of powers. Congress appropriates funds but cannot spend them, and the President spends funds but cannot appropriate them. This is the single most important protection we have against political corruption and pork barrel spending. Earmarks undermine this principle, and it's no coincidence that most of the congressional scandals over the years have involved earmarks. A local company produces a product the Pentagon neither needs nor wants. So what to do? Well, it simply ingratiates itself with the local congressman and has him tell the Pentagon what it needs and who will provide it. Then it rewards him lavishly at election time and repeats. Worthy projects in open competitive bidding do not need earmarks. They rise or fall on their merits. And if there's such a thing as a good earmark, the price to be paid is all the bad ones, and that's a high price indeed. Just the last omnibus spending bill in March included nearly 5,000 congressional earmarks totaling $9 billion for some of the most egregious examples of waste in the federal budget. Feral swine management in Arkansas, a national atomic testing museum in Las Vegas, a sheep experiment station in Idaho. Now, members can and should advocate for their districts and make the case for projects they deem worthy of the money that Congress has appropriated. The problem with earmarks is blurring these two roles and having members both advocate and decide. Now, many say they don't trust this president and his deputies to administer these funds appropriately and even-handedly, and I agree. But if you don't trust the president to administer the funds that we appropriate, then don't give him the money, period. We hear that earmarks simply assure that local governments get a fair break. No, what they actually do is turn the federal budget into a grab bag for local pork spending by the most powerful members in Congress. And they undermine the central tenet of federalism that local projects should be financed by local communities and federal spending reserved for the nation's general welfare. When a local government proposes an earmark, what's it saying? It's saying the project's so low on its priority list it doesn't dare spend its own taxpayers' money, but it's perfectly happy to have taxpayers in other communities foot the bill. The result is a long list of dubious projects that rob St. Petersburg to pay St. Paul for projects that St. Petersburg doesn't benefit from and St. Paul doesn't deem worthy enough to spend its own money on. Finally, it said that earmarks can grease legislation by buying off the votes of individual members. Add a few local projects for that member, and suddenly a bill he would never vote for on its merits becomes a local imperative overriding his sound judgment. But explain to me, how is that a good thing? Our new majority needs to make a dramatic, concrete, and credible statement that business as usual in Washington is over. Is there a more powerful statement we can make than to swear off this wasteful and corrupting practice of congressional earmarking? I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Florida, Mr. Soto, for 5 minutes.
America, we have liftoff. In a surge of fire, thunder, and smoke, Artemis 1 lit the early morning sky and was launched into the cosmos. At 9 million pounds of thrust, Artemis 1 is the most powerful rocket ever launched from the Earth. I was honored to see this historic flight firsthand early yesterday morning. And now, after 50 years, America takes its first major step towards going back to the moon. And we are bringing our many international partners with us, including the EU, Japan, Canada, and other allies. In Central Florida, we locals beam with pride that Artemis launched from the storied 39B pad from Cape Canaveral. This first mission was a long time in the making. The Orion spacecraft began to be developed during the Constellation program from 2005 to 2010. In 2017, I was proud to vote formally to establish the Artemis program. Over the next 5 years, America got to work, including every state. Many Central Floridians helped build or assemble the Orion capsule, the Space Launch System, the crawler transporter, and other components. During that 5-year period, NASA and SpaceX also kept busy on another key project, launching the Crew Dragon spacecraft. And on May 30th, 2020, I saw firsthand astronauts Bob and Doug launch in the spacecraft Endeavour and dock at the International Space Station. This was the first crewed launch from American soil in 9 years. Since then, we've seen multiple SpaceX and Blue Origin crewed flights. Travel in low Earth orbit to and from ISS is now a regular occurrence in Central Florida. With these flights well in hand, NASA turned its efforts towards deep space exploration once again. As the most powerful rocket ever to fly from the Earth, we knew the first Artemis launch would never be easy. But America never gives up. It turned out that after 2 scrubbed launches, third time was a charm. As I stand here this morning, the Orion spacecraft just had its next burn to set it on a course for a lunar flyby. The closest approach to the moon will be on November 21st, before entering a distant retrograde orbit around the moon on November 25th. It will roughly travel 1.3 million miles, farther than any other crew-designed spacecraft that has ever traveled. And it's a test flight, of course, so we'll push Orion's capabilities to the maximum to ensure it's safe for future astronauts. And then Orion will return to the Earth in about 25 and a half days. After that, NASA will conduct extensive evaluations of the returning Orion capsule. From there, the future of crewed lunar spaceflight will begin to accelerate. In 2024, Artemis 2 will be the first crewed launch around the moon in a new craft. In 2025, Artemis 3 crew will have the first woman and next man land on the moon. And in 2027, Artemis 4 will dock with the Lunar Gateway Space Station and begin our permanent presence on the moon. We will seek to discover water, learn from the harsh lunar environment, and advance new technologies. By the 2030s, these experiences and innovations will help us prepare to go to Mars and beyond. For today, let us take a moment to appreciate and thank the tremendous accomplishments of Administrator Bill Nelson and the amazing people at NASA. Yesterday was a critical milestone in our country's space history. This is a first major step for America to go back to the moon, and then on to Mars and beyond. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Pennsylvania, Mr. Thompson, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Madam Chair, I rise today to recognize the service of Jason Marie of Northern Cambria, Pennsylvania. Mr. Marie had his pass-in review for the United States Navy, an important step in passing basic training and becoming a sailor. To his family and those who know him well, Jason is a driven and dedicated person. When he graduated from Northern Cambria High School this spring, he knew military service was his best avenue for his life. Coming from a family where his mother is retired from the Army and his grandfather served in the Marine Corps, Jason naturally felt the call to serve after high school. Prior to serving in the United States Navy, Jason was an active member of his community and served on the Northern Cambria Volunteer Recreation Board. We are thankful both as a community and as a nation for Jason Marie and for all those who are serving in our military. Congratulations on becoming a sailor in the United States Navy, Jason. Madam Speaker, I rise today to congratulate Amy Shields of the Allegheny Hardwood Utilization Group, or AHUG, on being named to the Pennsylvania Top 100 in Agriculture list. The hardwood forest products industry represents a major part of Pennsylvania's economy. Pennsylvania's Allegheny Plateau region alone produces 80% of the cherry hardwood supply of the entire world. This is a critical ingredient for producing furniture and home goods for customers at home and abroad. This industry is fortunate to have their interests represented by Amy Shields, who is the current executive director of AHUG and the voice of the timber industry in Pennsylvania. Ms. Shields is a longtime veteran of the timber industry and has been a tireless advocate for business across 14 counties in northern Pennsylvania. Because of her efforts, loggers, sawmills, and hardwood manufacturers can continue to provide the highest quality forest products to the world. Congratulations, Amy, on this great accomplishment. Madam Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the Pennsylvania 4-H Dairy Judging Team on their top honors at the 100th National 4-H Dairy Cattle Judging Contest at the World Dairy Expo. In October, the Pennsylvania team traveled to Madison, Wisconsin to compete in the Dairy Cattle Judging Contest. The Pennsylvania team was made up of 4 members, with Ellie Curtis of Warren County representing the Pennsylvania 15th Congressional District. Their hard work paid off. Ellie Curtis placed 4th overall with the 8 years. As a team, Pennsylvania was first for overall placing for jerseys. They ranked 2nd in oral reasons, Brown, Swiss, and Guernseys, 3rd for Ayrshires, and 5th for Holsteins. As a result of their victory, the team is qualified to represent the United States this summer at the International Dairy Judging Contest in Glasgow, Scotland. Congratulations to Ellie and the entire Pennsylvania 4-H Dairy Judging Team. Madam Speaker, I rise today to congratulate the Indiana County Conservation District on their 75th anniversary celebration. Since 1947, the Indiana County Conservation District, or ICCD, has been protecting the natural resources of Indiana County and working to improve the quality of life for current and future generations. The ICCD and its dedicated employees and volunteers use education, technical assistance, and partnerships with local businesses to work towards a prosperous and sustainable future. Today, the ICCD implements a wide variety of projects dealing with agriculture, land preservation, environmental education, and wildlife management. All these efforts have helped to teach the importance of conservation to residents of all ages in Indiana County. The ICCD formally celebrated their 75th anniversary on October 7th with an open house at their headquarters in Indiana, Pennsylvania. Madam Speaker, please join me in congratulating the Indiana County Conservation District on 75 years of protecting the environment and ensuring that Indiana County continues to be a great place to live. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Virginia, Ms. Wexton, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in honor of Transgender Awareness Week. Each and every day, our trans friends and neighbors fight to make their voices heard, to demand their basic human rights, and to live free from increasing dehumanizing and hateful attacks. This spirit and fight deserves to be celebrated this week and every week. Madam Speaker, we stand with the trans community and join their fight to live openly and authentically without fear of discrimination. We also must not ignore the horrific violence targeting the trans community. Sunday marks Transgender Day of Remembrance as we honor that at least 32 transgender or gender nonconforming Americans who have been killed this year and commit to to doing all in our power to end this bigoted violence. As co-chair of the LGBTQ+ Equality Caucus's Transgender Equality Task Force, I will never stop working to uplift the voices and visibility of trans Americans and shine a light on the injustices this community faces. To my friends in the trans community, I want to let you know that you are seen, you are heard, and you have allies here in Congress. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair now recognizes the gentleman from Arkansas, Mr. Crawford, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Today I'm here to talk about reopening the very building in which we stand, the United States Capitol. It's been 2.5 years since Speaker Pelosi closed the People's House and told Americans it was part of our united effort to stop COVID-19. Over the last year, we've seen a sharp decline of hospitalizations and deaths from COVID. In fact, just 2 months ago, President Biden even declared the pandemic was over, yet certain protocols remain from the height of the pandemic. Today, when constituents come to visit my office, they need to be personally escorted around by staff. They have to be a small group. They can't go to the House gallery to watch votes take place. And my staff is only allowed to give a tour once a week. If the Speaker is really trying to prevent the spread of COVID, why is she forcing people to gather in large crowds around security checkpoints? This is the people's house, and yet we continue to deny access to the people, the very people that elected us to serve them, the very people whose taxes fund our operations. Because of these regulations, I've had to turn several of my constituents away. Not only do these regulations make it difficult to welcome every group into my office, but it also affects the function of all House offices. I have multiple visitors a day, and each time they come in, I have to send one of my staffers to find that visitor in a crowd of people, wait in a long security line, and then escort them through the House office buildings. It's inefficient and takes staff away from the valuable work they should be doing on behalf of the people of Arkansas. To top it all off, none of this makes any sense. Why did one of my staffers need to escort someone who's already been cleared by security into the building? And how does this protect against COVID-19? What's so dangerous about allowing visitors the ability to watch their government function? How can we claim to be a transparent government when we prohibit access to their elected officials? It's far past time to truly open up the Capitol to the people and restore its operation to pre-pandemic times. We cannot afford to keep distance between the American people and their elected representatives. These regulations prevent constituents from freely visiting their representatives, hinders productivity in our offices, and none of it makes us any safer. The people are an important part of the legislative process. In fact, they're the reason for it. And Madam Speaker, they should be welcomed here. And with that, I yield the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Bedegan, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, it was an honor to join Speaker Pelosi with the congressional delegation to Egypt to the United Nations Annual Climate Conference, COP27. Our bottom line message to world leaders: America is all in to fight the climate crisis. We stand with our global partners to reduce emissions, go green, and meet our goals under the Paris Climate Agreement. Shipping emissions is one of the largest emitters of greenhouse gases in the world. Congress has acted with the Inflation Reduction Act. Record climate investments are included in the IRA to accelerate our transition to the clean energy future. That includes a $3 billion investment for my bill, the Climate Smart Ports Act, to reduce emission from ports across the country. As someone who represents the Port of Los Angeles, I know firsthand the work we must do to go zero emissions and commit with other countries to reduce shipping emissions through the Green Shipping Challenge. To get there at the speed and scale necessary, it's critical that Congress invest in zero emissions shipping technologies and provide the EPA with the resources to regulate emissions from ships. Working together, we can exceed our 2030 emissions reduction target and take collective action to save our planet. Madam Speaker, I rise today in recognition of National Alzheimer's Disease Awareness Month. During this month, we honor the millions of Americans living with Alzheimer's, including my mom, along with the selfless family members and caregivers. The nearly 6 million people with Alzheimer's are our sisters, our brothers, our parents, our grandparents, and neighbors, and our fellow Americans. This epidemic will only continue to grow. In the next 30 years, the number of Americans with Alzheimer's is expected to reach nearly 14 million. Fortunately, we are at an inflection point in scientific progress where life-changing treatments may become available. But they also need to be affordable, and we need to continue to invest in research. That's why I'm introducing a bill this month to improve access to new innovative Alzheimer's treatments that become available. I will continue to work with CMS to ensure all drugs receive fair and accurate consideration for Medicare coverage. Our fight against this heartbreaking disease is nowhere near done. Madam Speaker, I rise today in recognition of National Family Caregivers Month. Today, more than 1 in 5 Americans provide care to someone with health or functional needs. Caregivers are the backbone of our families and communities. They are coworkers, siblings, parents, grandparents, and neighbors. Their service and sacrifice for our families and country are essential and immeasurable work, but their contributions are often overlooked and undervalued. Caregiving requires time, money, resources, patience, and can take a toll on a caregiver's physical and mental health. As a caregiver for my own mom, I want every family caregiver to know that you are not alone, that we are in this with you. Your efforts do not go unnoticed. You deserve to feel and to be celebrated. We must do more to ensure that you have the support that you need. You have a champion in Congress who will fight for higher wages and better benefits for you, and that we must continue to invest in programs like IHHS and the WPCS so that our elders can stay home and have the dignity to be in their home in their later years and be taken care of. Thank you again to all the caregivers out there for everything you do. Madam Speaker, I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from New York, Ms. Tenney, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to honor my dear friend, Staff Sergeant Lewis Smith, affectionately known as Slugger, and also very affectionately known as the mayor of Washington Mills, who recently passed away at the age of 99. Lou was born in Washington Mills, New York in 1922 and graduated from Sequoia Valley Central School in 1940. After the terrible attacks on Pearl Harbor, Lou immediately signed up to fight for our country in the United States Air Force, at the time known as the 13th Army Corps, 307th Bombardment Group for the South Pacific. A member of the greatest generation, Lou has honorably served our country in World War II, completing 50 combat missions in the South Pacific with, as I said, the 13th Army Air Corps 307th Bombardment Group. He wrote a wonderful book chronicling his experience in the war, which I highly recommend to everyone who's interested in finding out what it was really like to just be an average member of the Air Force, enlisting and learning and growing and sacrificing. After the war, Lou came home to Washington Mills and married the love of his life, Jane, on May 5th, 1945, after moving to Denver to complete Lou's military service. The couple moved back to Washington Mills, where they would live together for 76 years until Jane's passing in 2021. Upon moving back to Washington Mills, Lou worked as a welder for Utica Structural Steel before taking over his father-in-law's service stations with his 2 sons. Later, Lou would take on positions as a maintenance man for the town and New Hartford Highway and Police Departments. On top of his service as a mechanic, Lou also served our community as one of the founding members of the Willowvale Fire Company, Incorporated, serving since 1950, and as the leader of the Clone Post 1000 American Legion Post. Lou is a wonderful person, was a wonderful person, a dear friend, and a tremendous community servant. I want to thank him and his family for their friendship and for the lifetime of service and commitment to our community by the entire family. He was truly a special gem in our community, like no other person, probably my greatest inspiration other than my own father. Lou is a person of great integrity, great honesty, wonderful sage advice to everyone he met, and also one of the kindest people and one of the most caring, giving people I've met in my life. And I thank him and his family and his wonderful wife, Jane, for all the wonderful times and actually great experiences I had, and their support of our community and all of those people who serve in the fire service, police service, served our nation in uniform. He was truly embodied our greatest generation, and he is sorely missed by our community. Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor Edward Bradley of Chadwicks, New York, who passed away earlier this week. Edward was a lifelong resident of the Utica area and dedicated his life to serving our community and his family. He worked for several companies in the area, including James Donovan Roofing and Mohawk Containers, where he worked for 40 years. Incidentally, James Donovan was one of our New York State senators from our region. On top of his work, Edward was also a 50-year member of the Willowvale Fire Company, where he served previously as president and vice president. He also served as a member of the United County Fire Police, the state director of the New York State Fire Police Association, and was honored by the Willowvale Fire Company with the very prestigious Ironman Award. Edward was also a member of the Utica Elks Lodge and was nominated by the United Way of the Mohawk Valley for the 100 Heroes of Mohawk Valley, recognizing his tremendous and honorable dedicated service to our community. Edward, thank you for your lifetime of service, and may your memory continue to be a blessing to all of us and the new generations of people that come before us. We will never forget your commitment to our region, and your family remains in our thoughts and our prayers. Your department is in great hands. They learn from truly the best. With that, Madam Speaker, I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Pennsylvania, Ms. Scanlon, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today during National Survivors of Homicide Victims Awareness Month, a time when the pain and grief of loss should be honored with action, to read the words and the plea of a heartbroken mother in Pennsylvania 5 constituent, Molly Collington, who lost her son Sam to gun violence a year ago on November 28, 2021. By all accounts, Sam Collington was a remarkable young man who left an outsized impact on our community. His mother, Molly, shared her story with me earlier this fall when I met with her and her colleagues at Delaware County's Moms Demand Action chapter. I was deeply moved by her advocacy in the face of unimaginable loss and grief, and I'm sharing her words with her permission now. My name is Molly Collington. I'm Sam Collington's broken-hearted mother. Sam was the best son any mother could ever ask for. He was kind, smart, reliable, and without a doubt, one of the funniest people to ever walk the earth. Sam was murdered on November 28, 2021. The day began with Sam loading up his father's car with clean laundry, some leftover turkey, and supplies to carry him through the rest of the semester. He was returning to his apartment at Temple University after the Thanksgiving weekend. He planned to drop the items off at his apartment, then return home to watch HBO with me, sleep in his own bed, and then take the train back to school Monday morning. That did not happen. Because on his street, near his apartment, was a career criminal with an illegal gun, waiting to steal the car of the next person that drove down the street. The next person was my Eagle Scout son, Sam. Sam was shot 4 times and died less than 30 minutes later at Temple Hospital. Sam was so knowledgeable about our country and all its history. He knew every single president and could talk for hours about politics. So it was no surprise when he told his father and I that he wanted to study political science at Temple University after high school. His fervor for politics and government started very young. He proudly served as his high school's president for his junior and senior year. During his time at Temple, he served as the president of the Political Science Society, never missing an opportunity to make every day count. He planned to attend law school and study constitutional law. He was an activist. He campaigned for local politicians and interned at City Hall, where he worked with elections. He was responsible for getting hundreds of people registered to vote on and off campus. He was a poll watcher. He even went on a Bernie journey, where he rode with fellow Temple students on a school bus to North and South Carolina to campaign for his favorite politician, Bernie Sanders. Sam truly believed in the not me, us mantra, which is why he was so outspoken in his love of politics and striving for a better world. Sam had a larger-than-life personality. As one of his professors pointed out, it's impossible to be involved in the political science department and not know Sam Collington. He became known on campus as Poli-Sci Sam. To lose a child is the greatest pain any parent can ever experience. Every day, my heart breaks all over again. To lose a child like Sam, knowing that he was destined for something big, is absolutely soul-crushing. How his father, sister, and I are still standing seems impossible to believe. He made us better people just by knowing him. We're destroyed without him, his cheerfulness, his wit, and his intelligence. One of the hardest parts is knowing my son's murder was preventable. Our children should be able to go to school safely. We should not have to worry about making sure they know where the closest exits are at the movie theaters, supermarkets, concerts, and churches. I implore our elected officials to do more to keep guns out of the wrong hands. We must do better. We have to do better. We are failing our children. They say time heals all wounds, but I can tell you without any doubt whatsoever, not this one. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Rose. Excuse me. Sorry.
Madam Speaker, there is no denying that the crisis at our southern border was caused by President Biden and his administration's open border policies. Since President Biden took office, more than 3.8 million illegal immigrants have been apprehended at our southern border. Meanwhile, the Commissioner of Customs and Border Protection was falling asleep during meetings while this crisis continued on his watch. This is exactly why, around 2 weeks ago, I joined 15 of my fellow House Republicans, led by Congressman Heiss, in calling on CBP Commissioner Magnus to resign. Thankfully, he did, and now our country and its national security are better off. Already, before Republicans even officially take the majority, we are holding the Biden administration accountable. And I promise that come January 3rd, when the new Congress is sworn in, you can expect more accountability where that came from. Madam Speaker, the Congressional Budget Office has confirmed what most Tennesseans already knew. President Biden's plan to give a handout to millions of college-educated Americans will be paid for with even more deficit spending than has been anticipated, around $400 billion in deficit spending to be exact. This is just shocking, and the President thinks it's acceptable and legal to spend this kind of money without congressional approval, but it is neither. We hear $10,000 per borrower thrown around a lot, but CBO says 24 million people would receive $20,000 in debt forgiveness under the plan. That's basically a 2022 Hyundai Elantra or a Kia Soul or a brand new Nissan Sentra. I ask my Democrat colleagues, how are you okay with giving away the equivalent of a new car to 24 million people and asking those without student debt to foot the bill? Asking Tennessee plumbers to foot the bill for Harvard-educated lawyers? Asking America's blue-collar workers to give a subsidy to some of the best educated people and best paid people in this country? This administration must reverse course on this wrong-headed, regressive policy. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Garcia, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise to recognize the need for us to prohibit the physical restraining of young children as a form of discipline in schools. Shockingly, in the 2017 through 2018 school year, nearly 71,000 elementary school-aged children were physically restrained. Even worse, 80% of the restrained children were kids with disabilities, some younger than 5 years old, even though they only make up 13% of the student population. In Texas, 91% of all reported restraints are experienced by children with disabilities. And regrettably, children who are Latino and Black are at much higher risk of being restrained. Since 2020, nearly 20 fatalities have occurred because of poor restraining techniques and children's bodies simply being too small to endure this form of discipline. This is simply heartbreaking and is totally unacceptable. And it doesn't appear to be slowing down. Just this month, Misha Baker, a mother from the Houston Independent School District, received a letter that her 4-year-old son, 4 years old, in elementary school, it was in elementary school, and it was told that he had been restrained at school. Ms. Baker learned 2 days after the incident that this restraining had been unjustified and that the teacher was on administrative leave. This is a very deeply troubling case. Fortunately, her son was not physically hurt, but think of the scars emotionally that he must endure. This is, again, totally unacceptable. Many times children are hurt, like a 10-year-old student from a charter school in Waco, Texas, who sadly was restrained to the point that he actually had a broken arm in 4 places. A broken arm because he was restrained last month. The child had a learning disability. Madam Speaker, put yourself in the shoes of these families. 1 minute you're hugging your child, saying goodbye, they're off to school. The next, you get a call that your child has been restrained, put in handcuffs or a zip tie as a form of discipline. This is flat wrong, it's inhumane, and it must stop. Madam Speaker, today I'll be introducing my resolution called No Kids in Cuffs Resolution to encourage local and state governments to prohibit this practice. Young children who are restrained are more likely to experience short-term and long-term problems in sleep, learning, relationships, and trust. In fact, being restrained is so traumatic that it can even impede a child's development. Many of them go on to struggle with suicidal thoughts and are forced to live with post-traumatic anxiety. All this on top of the physical pain that they may experience. And while the children clearly must be the first we protect, sometimes teachers, administrators, and officers are also at risk of developing trauma from just simply witnessing a child being restrained to the degree that their little arm is broken in 4 places. It's hard to endure. It's hard to witness. And this trauma must end. Let's make sure no other child must endure what parent must endure what Miss Baker and thousands of other families must go through. Let's begin the conversation of prohibiting the physical restraining of children. Let's put children over restraints. Let's put books over cuffs. That's why I'm introducing today, Madam Speaker, the No Kids in Cuffs resolution, and I ask all my colleagues to help me. We must end this practice. Children should focus on their books and their learning, not on cuffs and trauma. Thank you, Madam Speaker. I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentleman from North Carolina, Mr. McHenry, for 5 minutes.
Well, thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, today I come to the floor to honor a member of my team who has devoted the past 18 years to serving the constituents of North Carolina's 10th Congressional District, serving it with integrity and honor, especially for veterans and service members. It's my true honor today to pay tribute to my friend and my lead veterans and military caseworker, Joanna Rao, who is retiring at the end of the year. Joanna has been with me since the beginning of my service here in the House, in the beginning of 2005. And since day one, anyone who encountered Joanna instantly knew her passion for our veterans. We'd have the veterans line up just to go sit down and talk to Joanna and have a conversation with her because of her warm spirit and what a wonderful person she is, and everyone understood that very quickly. And the numbers tell that story about her passion for our veterans. During her service, Joanna has handled just shy of 6,000 veterans cases and 362 active duty military cases. She's helped 106 veterans obtain medals they were due for their service. She played an important role in helping establish the VA community-based outpatient clinic in Hickory and in Forest City, North Carolina, and was a key resource to county veteran service officers in 17 different counties during her service. Susan Hall, the veteran service officer in Rutherford County, said of Joanna, "Joanna's commitment to serving the veterans of our community is exemplary. I will miss her greatly. The congressman, as well as the people of Rutherford County and the great state of North Carolina, have been blessed with the service of Joanna Rao." Joanna, you'll be missed. And you'll be missed by so many, not just the veterans, but your coworkers who love you dearly. And not just your coworkers, but me. And being able to work with you and to call you a friend and to learn from you has meant a great deal to me and to my wife, Julia, as well, and my kids. So we want to thank you for your service. I want to thank you for your loving spirit, the strength of your faith. It seems like just yesterday that you and I and your husband, Freddie, sat down for lunch in the fall of 2003 to talk about politics. And I learned a lot during that first election to Congress from you, Joanna. And I want to say thank you for your service. Thank you for your friendship. We know you won't be a stranger. Thanks so much. We love you. And I yield back, Madam Speaker.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Minnesota, Ms. Omar, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I want to start out by thanking my community for re-electing me to serve Minnesota's 5th Congressional District. Our state continues to have the highest voter turnout in the nation. It's one of the easiest states to vote in and should be a model for states across the country. In my district, we increased our voter share by 10% points from 2020, and we got more votes than any other House candidate in Minnesota. Beyond that, Minnesotans voted to flip the Minnesota Senate, creating a Democratic trifecta for the first time in nearly a decade. We also voted for incredible new leaders throughout our state that have many firsts behind their names. Bobby Joe Champion will be the first black president of the Minnesota Senate. Zainab Mohammed will be the first African-born Somali woman Gen Z member to be elected to the Minnesota Senate. Along with Zainab, Claire Amu Forbitten and Erin May Quaid will be among the first black women elected to the Minnesota Senate. Samantha Sensor-Mura will be the first Japanese-American member of the Minnesota House. Lee Fink will be the first trans member of the Minnesota House. And Mary Moriarty will be the first openly gay woman elected to the Hennepin County Attorney, to be the Hennepin County Attorney. Representation matters. We know none of these candidates ran to be firsts. They ran to make a difference for their communities. When I was first elected to the Minnesota House, I was the first and only Somali American legislator. Now there will be 11 Somali American legislators across the country. It is often said, you can't be what you can't see. I'm incredibly proud that we, along with so many others, have been able to inspire countless people to run for office. So now many more people will finally see themselves reflected in various places and positions of power. I also want to take a moment to honor two of my mentors, Representative Jim Daphne and Senator Patricia Torres Ray, who are retiring from the Minnesota State House and Senate. Thank you for representing our communities for so well over the years. I can't wait to see the work you continue to do to make sure our state thrives. As we get ready to welcome in new leaders throughout our state, this is our time to deliver meaningful changes for Minnesotans. Now is the time to deliver affordable childcare, lower healthcare costs, invest in K-12 and higher education, combat the climate crisis, and legalize marijuana. Minnesota NICE is leading with compassion and getting things done. Let's get to work. And thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise today to talk about the situation in Burma. It has been my honor this year to be member of the International Parliamentary Inquiry on Myanmar. Our group of lawmakers representing Africa, Asia, Europe, North America released our final report earlier this month, which I will submit as an extension of my remarks. The tragedy of the Burmese military coup is immense, but the resilience of the Burmese people and their movement for democracy is deeply inspiring. The United States must recognize the National Unity Government as the legitimate government of Burma and never give legitimacy to the coup leaders. But we should also be clear that the National Unity Government must include Rohingya representation to be legitimate. The international community has not done nearly enough to support the democratic aspirations of the Burmese people. We must lead by example while we still have time. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from California, Ms. Lee, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Now, when the Supreme Court voted to overturn Roe versus Wade, I was totally outraged. We knew that that day was coming, and as horrific as it was and is, we were ready. But I was not alone in that outrage. Madam Speaker, over the past few weeks, the American people took their outrage and they turned it into action. From Kentucky to California, red states to blue, our constituents made their voices heard and their message is clear. Americans trust people, not politicians, to make their own decisions about their health and their lives, including about abortions. Americans will use their vote to strike down attacks on reproductive rights time and time again, and yes, support reproductive freedom. Now, Madam Speaker, it's time to turn our constituents' demands into congressional action. And yes, to my Republican colleagues who try to claim their extremism as public opinion, well, we saw that the American people, the majority of American people, are not buying it. I'm determined to ensure that their voices are heard, to fight for all of our rights to make our own decisions over our bodies. And I won't stop, and none of my colleagues here will stop until the right to abortion is available and to keep politicians from interfering in our personal decisions about our bodies. We're going to keep fighting that this is available to everyone, regardless of race, zip code, or income. It's our bodies, and it's our choices. Madam Speaker, I rise today in support of House Amendment S. 3902, the Fire Act. And I am proud to support this bill and thank my good friends and fellow Californians, Senator Padilla and Congresswoman Lofgren for their leadership, and Chairman DeFazio and the Speaker for bringing it to the floor. Communities across the world are feeling the impact of climate change, fueling wildfires and harming fragile ecosystems and communities. And I was privileged to be in Egypt last week for COP27, and it was very apparent and clear, and the voices were heard, that we have got to address these critical issues with regard to the climate crisis now. And I have directly witnessed the devastating effects of wildfires on homes and livelihoods in my community, which is why I'm proud to support this bill and urge my colleagues to vote yes with me. Current wildfires are growing larger and hotter, requiring urgent and robust action from the federal government. The Fire Act allows FEMA to pre-deploy assets during high-risk times, improves relocation assistance for public infrastructure affected by fires, and ensures equity of assistance for tribal communities and governments. I urge my colleagues to support this amended bill, and thank you, and I yield the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee, for 5 minutes. Do you want to go? Okay, the chair recognizes the gentleman from Texas, Mr. Veazey, for 5 minutes.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of Officer Brandon Sy. He was a brave member of the Grand Prairie Police Department, and he died in the line of duty this past week. Officer Sy bravely protected the people of North Texas and the city of Grand Prairie since January of this year, after serving 5 years with the Los Angeles Police Department. The Grand Prairie Police Department described Officer Sy as a loving friend, a trusted colleague, an outstanding officer whose passion provided service to the public. I join the entire North Texas community and all of his brothers and sisters in blue and all of the Metroplex departments in keeping Officer Brandon Sy's family, friends, and all of his colleagues at the city of Grand Prairie in our thoughts and prayers during this time. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
The chair recognizes the gentlewoman from Texas, Ms. Jackson Lee.
I thank the Speaker very much. I rise this morning to engage in a limited but hopefully important discussion about America's history and to encourage my colleagues for collaboration. It is in reference to H.R. 40, the Commission to Study Slavery and Develop Reparation Proposals. I stand on the perspective of how important it is for us to engage in dialogue. We're hearing across America that Americans are frightened about the discussion of our differences. This land was first held by the indigenous people, Native Americans. Every other group came to America. whether or not you're of European heritage, Hispanic heritage, Asian Pacific, Southeast Asian, or whether you are African heritage. As a descendant of enslaved Africans, we are the only group that came as slaves to this country and held in bondage for over 200 years. Now, you have not seen African Americans refuse their patriotism, refuse to serve. We have served in every war since the Revolutionary War. You've never seen African Americans not shed or refuse to shed blood for the freedom of this country or to wear the uniform. You've not seen us shy away from serving as firefighters and law enforcement, teachers, business persons, social justice leaders such as Dr. King, John Lewis, and yes, Malcolm X. You've not seen us as women, Rosa Parks, Sojourner Truth, Harriet Tubman, Coretta Scott King, stand away from the fight. We have embraced freedom, justice, and equality. You did not see us attack this most solid and somber institution, sacred, on January 6, 2021. We were not the masses that were trying to undermine democracy. In fact, in this last election, I stood on the premise of defending democracy, and I take no back seat to my love of this nation. And so I asked my colleagues, why do you in any way doubt the value and importance of H.R. 40? The purpose is to acknowledge the fundamental injustice and inhumanity of slavery in the United States and to establish a commission to study and consider a national apology and proposal for reparations for the institution of slavery. It was based on the premise of racism. There was, in fact, no compensation, no life insurance, no salaries, and slaves were born, they lived and died in slavery, never seeing freedom. They worked from sunup and beyond, and they worked until they fell dead in the fields. They built this nation. They built the United States Capitol. They built the White House. They, in fact, created an economic engine by making cotton king, and they created an economic engine by this transatlantic slave trade. The traders decided to stop trading spices and gold and to use the human beings that they marched for 300 miles to weaken the slaves so they would not have a fight before getting on those ships. Many dropped into the watery grave before they got on. Many died in the dark passage. But yet here we are today. And so this is not a pointing the finger. This is not accusatory. This is, in fact, a reconciliation. I insist that we establish this commission, and we must establish it by a vote or establish it by executive order. Reverend Mark Thompson said, a political activist for social justice, said, if we were granted H.R. 40 by executive order, it would be America once and for all saying black lives actually do matter and this nation must be repaired. It is restoration and repair, but it stands on the basis of facts. There is no doubt that we have been impacted. That DNA in the trajectory of slavery to today. For example, at COVID, black African Americans got COVID at a rate nearly 1.5 times higher than that of white people, or hospitalized at a rate nearly 4 times higher and 3 times likely to die. COVID hit us very desperately. Interestingly, a recent peer-reviewed study from Harvard Medical School suggests that reparations for African Americans could have cut COVID-19 transmission and infection rates both among blacks and the population at large. Reparations are curative. They're not punishment. The analysis continued to look at data throughout the nation. And so as we move in this lame duck session, it is important that we come together for reconciliation, restoration, and provide the commission to study slavery and to develop reparation proposals. I thank my colleagues for their support, and I believe together we make America strong, America free, and America just, and America equal. With that, I yield back my time.
Anyone else? Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the Chair declares the House in recess until noon today.
The House will be in order. The House will be in order. The prayer will be offered by our chaplain, Chaplain Kibben.
Would you pray with me? Today, O God, we lay before you our petitions, prayers, intercessions, and thanksgiving. We request that you bestow upon us the joy of your presence among us, that when we look upon the faces of those who labor in these halls, known and unknown, elected or employed, we may see your image. We pray for the health and welfare of this illustrious body, that as the scenery changes and the actors move on, around, or off the stage, you will uphold each one. Guide them in the roles you have called them to fulfill, and grant them wisdom to discern the way you would have them go. Lord, may our prayers serve as an intercession for those who do not have enough courage or strength to speak their own needs, for those who haven't enough faith to trust what lies ahead, and for those who do not know how to receive the mercy you offer us. Then accept our offerings of thanksgiving to you for the bounty you lay before us, the gift to labor, to serve, and contribute our energies wherever you call us, but especially here in this, our nation's capital. May our words be good and pleasing to you as we pray them in your most holy name. Amen.
Thank you. The chair has examined the journal of the last day's proceedings and announces to the House her approval thereof. Pursuant to Clause 1 of Rule 1, the journal stands approved. The Pledge of Allegiance will be led by the gentleman from South Carolina, Mr. Wilson.
Everyone, including our guests in the gallery, please join in. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
The chair will entertain up to 15 requests for 1-minute speeches on each side of the aisle. Does the gentlewoman from New Hampshire seek recognition? Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to celebrate the passage of the Speak Out Act. As the co-chair of the bipartisan task force to end sexual violence, I've seen how perpetrators of workplace sexual assault and harassment hide behind non-disclosure agreements to sweep their heinous conduct under the rug. Let's remember that the vast majority of assault and harassment in the workplace goes unreported, and most perpetrators are never held accountable. It takes tremendous courage for survivors to come forward. I am so proud that under the leadership of Speaker Nancy Pelosi, this House overwhelmingly passed the Speak Out Act yesterday, and we have sent this common sense bipartisan bill to the President's desk. Thank you, and I yield back the balance of my time.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, requesting unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise today to recognize November as National Career Development Month. As co-chair of the bipartisan House Career and Technical Education Caucus, I was proud to introduce the National Career Development Month resolution last week with my CTE caucus co-chair and good friend, Congressman Jim Langevin. National Career Development Month raises awareness of future career opportunities and development programs for all individuals. A highly skilled workforce is a business's #1 asset and provides a competitive edge. National Career Development Month also is a time to recognize the professionals who guide learners to become leaders of tomorrow. Throughout the month, schools and businesses will have the chance to showcase different career paths that align with various interests and skills. These opportunities will better prepare students as they begin to enter the workforce. As we continue through National Career Development Month, I'd like to encourage employers, students, and workers of all ages to take advantage of career development, putting them in the driver's seat of their career. Thank you, Madam Speaker, and I yield back the balance of my time.
And for what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and to revise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today in honor of Transgender Awareness Week. Trans Americans made history this year by running and winning in more elections than ever before. Breakthrough representations in media have led to historic numbers of transgender and non-binary characters on screen. In many ways, transgender Americans are more visible than ever. And at the same time, the trans community has been forced to withstand severe attacks. From laws that would strip fundamental rights to dehumanizing vitriol deployed by elected officials and public figures. These attacks treat trans people as threats to society rather than neighbors, parents, children, friends, and loved ones. There are more than 2 million people in the United States that identify as transgender or non-binary. Trans Americans exist in all walks of life, all across the country. This Transgender Week, I call on my colleagues to turn awareness into action. And to the trans community, you have allies in Congress. And let it be known that there's been no greater friend of trans people in this country or LGBTQ people than Speaker Nancy Pelosi. And we will not cease to fight, to protect, and advocate for our transgender siblings, not just this week, but all year long.
Gentleman's time has expired. For what purpose does the gentleman from South Carolina seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute, revise and extend my
Without
remarks.
objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I am grateful to recognize the 2022 Army Congressional Fellow, Master Sergeant John Gardner, for his service to the 2nd District of South Carolina. His year-long service with the office is ending, and John will be missed. Not only has he been an indispensable coordinator and contributor to legislative goals, including the National Defense Authorization Act, but a valued team player. Including a combat tour on the front line of infantry medic in Iraq, John has held many leadership assignments throughout his 20-year decorated career in the Army, including most recently in the Defense Attaché Office of the American Embassy in Tashkent, Uzbekistan. John hails from Houston, Texas, has a master's degree from Colorado State, and holds 2 graduate degrees. His next assignment is in the Pentagon, where John will be a valued participant of Peace Through Strength. In conclusion, God bless our troops who successfully protected America for 20 years as the global war on terrorism continues, moving from the Afghanistan safe haven to America. Godspeed, Speaker Nancy Pelosi.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Massachusetts seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to discuss the urgent need to tackle the affordable housing crisis. The cost of housing is the single biggest challenge facing the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Last week, I hosted an affordable housing conference in Attleboro with my friend and colleague, Juana Matias, the HUD Regional Administrator for New England. We spoke with housing officials and developers across the district about the programs and funding available for affordable housing development. I reiterated my commitment to policies from zoning reform to LIHTC expansion to increase production of affordable housing. Expanding affordable housing is a multi-government effort that needs support on the federal, state, and local level. As the next Congress approaches, we must recommit ourselves to making housing more affordable for working families. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentlewoman from Iowa seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I seek unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. I rise today to recognize Christina Schauer, a veteran and nurse from Dubuque, Iowa, whose courage and dedication to serving others is unmatched. Christina served our country overseas as a combat medic in Iraq. Our veterans face immense challenges when returning home, and unfortunately, our women veterans are often afraid to speak up about their experiences. They may feel invisible or that their service wasn't worthy, and as a result, they may be less likely to seek the care that they have earned. But Christina is working to right this wrong by sharing her own story. She has championed women veteran visibility, empowering her sisters in sacrifice to talk more about their service and seek the health care and the benefits they deserve. So Christina, thank you for your service and for your commitment to empower women veterans. You are an inspiration to all of us. So I yield back the balance of my time. Thank you, Madam Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Illinois seek recognition?
Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute and rise and extend.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor the life of my friend Karen Sutton, who recently passed away after a long, hard fight with cancer. Karen spent much of her life in Springfield and was a valued member of our community, always volunteering and attending events all the way up to a few weeks before she passed. After a long and successful career in data processing, Karen retired from the Illinois Department of Health in 2002. Karen spent much of her time in the bowling alley, playing in multiple leagues and eventually becoming the league secretary. Karen also enjoyed traveling to national Mustang shows where she won many awards. These shows, put on by the Mustang Club of America, allowed Karen to connect with a community of drivers from all over the nation whom she greatly valued. She was also praised for her hard work in helping the judging secretaries during these fun yet competitive events. I'm grateful to have known Karen and her husband Carol for many years, and I'm thankful for all of her work to make our community a better place to live. Karen is survived by her husband Carol, daughter Julie, and son Brent. My condolences to the entire Sutton family during this difficult time. Karen, may you rest in peace.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Mississippi seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House floor for 1 minute and to advise and extend my remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you. Madam Speaker, I rise today to honor the 100-year anniversary of the Mississippi Farm Bureau Federation. Mississippi Farm Bureau is the largest agricultural organization in the state and represents the social and economic interests of farmers, ranchers, and rural communities. Its statewide grassroots structure allows it to be an effective organization representing and promoting 17 commodities in Mississippi. The organization is a valuable resource on issues of importance to our farm families, and it works with federal and state lawmakers to advocate for these priorities. I look forward to continuing to work with Mississippi Farm Bureau on important agriculture issues in the future. May God bless our farmers, and may God continue to bless Mississippi Farm Bureau. Thank you, and I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from California seek recognition?
Seeking unanimous consent to address the House for a minute, revise the state remarks.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. As I watch my home state of California go down in flames, literally, as we watch how we're running out of electricity, we're running out of water, our store shelves are having less and less food varieties available, our farmers being pushed out of business, our farm workers being pushed out of business, as we see all these things happen with mandates coming down the pike, requiring more and more electricity has to be renewable. What is the answer in California? Let's tear down some hydroelectric dams in my district and Mr. Bentz's district. Let's tear them down. We're going to lose green power. We'll go do it over the objections of the people that live there and have objected by over 70% to the removal of these dams, all for an unproven environmental benefit. So enjoy that even less electricity, enjoy even less food grown in my district and Mr. Bentz's district, enjoy even more of the crisis that is facing us in rural California, rural America, and on our store shelves and in our electrical wires, due to even more unfounded environmental rules being forced upon us to tear out perfectly good hydroelectric dams. Thanks one hell of a lot.
For what purpose does the gentleman from North gentlewoman from North Carolina seek recognition.
I ask unanimous consent to address the House, Madam Speaker.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, I rise to recognize Randy Whittington, Gary Foster, Angela Rogers, and Joey Haney of the Retail Solutions Group in Wilkesboro, North Carolina. I was proud to join them recently at a ribbon-cutting ceremony for their 4th and largest warehouse. In the last few years, Retail Solutions Group has grown from fewer than 8 employees to now over 200. This is a magnificent accomplishment. Madam Speaker, North Carolina remains a hub for entrepreneurship and innovation, thanks to people such as Randy, Gary, Angela, and Joey. Congratulations to Retail Solutions Group on this new and exciting chapter. I look forward to hearing more about the strides you will make in the days and months ahead. I yield back.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Pennsylvania seek recognition?
Speaker, I request unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentleman is recognized for 1 minute.
Madam Speaker, as we here in the House and our country come near the close of 2022, the United States has gone through the worst year on our record for illegal border crossings. Meanwhile, we have a Homeland Security Secretary that tells us regularly that the border is secure. Just this last month, over 230,000 illegals have crossed that we know of. Along with this, gasoline prices are over $4 a gallon again, and the cost of Thanksgiving for most families will be over 20% what it was last year. This has been a troubling year. America needs a new course. This House needs a new course, a new direction, and new priorities that strengthen America and Americans. I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. For what purpose does the gentlewoman from California seek recognition?
Madam Speaker, I ask unanimous consent to address the House for 1 minute.
Without objection, the gentlewoman is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, as we gather here, we stand on sacred ground, the chamber of the United States House of Representatives, the heart of American democracy. I will never forget the first time I saw the Capitol. It was on a cold January day when I was 6 years old. My father, Thomas D'Alessandro Jr., was about to be sworn in for his 5th term in Congress, representing our beloved hometown of Baltimore. I was riding in the car with my brothers, and they were thrilled and jumping up and down and saying to me, Nancy, look, there's the Capitol. And every time I'd say, I don't see any Capitol. Is it a capital A, a capital B, or a capital C? And finally, I saw it. A stunning white building with a magnificent dome. I believed then, as I believe today, this is the most beautiful building in the world because of what it represents. The Capitol is a temple of our democracy, of our Constitution, of our highest ideals. On that day, I stood with my father on this floor as he took a sacred oath to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. All of us who have served in this House have taken the hallowed oath of office, and it is the oath that stitches us together in a long and storied heritage. Colleagues who served before us are all our colleagues. Colleagues like Abraham Lincoln, Daniel Webster, Shirley Chisholm, Patsy Mink, and our beloved John Lewis. Personally, it binds me as a colleague to my father, a proud New Deal congressman and one of the earliest Italian Americans to serve in the Congress. And this is an oath we are duty-bound to keep, and it links us with the highest aspirations of the ages. In this room, our colleagues across history have abolished slavery, granted women the right to vote, established Social Security and Medicare, offered a hand to the weak, care to the sick, education to the young, and hope to the many. Indeed, it is here, under the gaze of our patriarch, George Washington, in the People's House, that we have done the people's work. My colleagues, I stand before you as Speaker of the House, as a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a devout Catholic, a proud Democrat, and a patriotic American, a citizen of the greatest republic in the history of the world. Which President Lincoln called the last best hope on earth. Indeed, in the words attributed to another of our colleagues, the legendary Daniel Webster, he said, "Hold on, my friends, to the Constitution of your country and the government established under it. Miracles do not cluster. That which has happened but once in 6,000 years cannot be expected to happen often." Indeed, American democracy is majestic, but it is fragile. Many of us here have witnessed its fragility firsthand, tragically, in this chamber. And so democracy must be forever defended from forces that wish it harm. Last week, the American people spoke, and their voices were raised in defense of liberty, of the rule of law, and of democracy itself. With these elections, the people stood in the breach and repelled the assault on democracy. They resoundingly rejected violence and insurrection, and in doing so, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. And now we owe to the American people our very best to deliver on their faith, to forever reach for the more perfect union, the glorious horizon that our founders promised. The questions before this Congress and in this moment are urgent. Questions about the ideals that this House is charged by the Constitution to preserve and protect. Establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity. Our posterity, our children. Babies born today will live into the next century, and our decisions will determine their future for generations to come. While we will have our disagreements on policy, we must remain fully committed to our shared fundamental mission, to hold strong to our most treasured democratic ideals, to cherish the spark of divinity in each and every one of us, and to always put our country first. In their infinite wisdom, our founders gave us their guidance, e pluribus unum, from many one. They could not have imagined how large our country would become or how different we would be from one another. But they knew we had to be united as one. We the people, one country, one destiny. It has been with great pride in my 35 years in the House I have seen this body grow more reflective of our great nation, our beautiful nation. When I came to the Congress in 1987, there were 12 Democratic women. Now there are over 90, and we want more. The new members of our Democratic caucus will be about 75% women, people of color, and LGBTQ. And we have brought more voices to the decision-making table. When I entered leadership in 2002, there were 8 of us. Today, there are 17 members of the leadership. When I first came to the floor at 6 years old, never would I have thought that someday I would go from homemaker to House Speaker. In fact, I never... In fact, I never intended to run for public office. Mommy and Daddy taught us through their example that public service is a noble calling and that we all have a responsibility to help others. In our family, my brother Tommy then became mayor of Baltimore also. But it's been my privilege to play a part in forging extraordinary progress for the American people. I have enjoyed working with 3 presidents, achieving historic investments in clean energy with President George Bush. Transformative health care reform with President Barack Obama. And forging the future, from infrastructure to healthcare to climate action with President Joe Biden. Now we must move boldly into the future, grounded by the principles that have propelled us this far and open to fresh possibilities for the future. Scripture teaches us that for everything there is a season, a time for every purpose under heaven. My friends, no matter what title you all, my colleagues, have bestowed upon me, speaker, leader, whip, there is no greater official honor for me than to stand on this floor and to speak for the people of San Francisco. This I will continue to do as a member of the House, speaking for the people of San Francisco, serving the great state of California, and defending our Constitution. And with great confidence in our caucus, I will not seek re-election to Democratic leadership in the next Congress. For me, the hours come for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus that I so deeply respect. And I'm grateful that so many are ready and willing to shoulder this awesome responsibility. Madam Speaker, standing here today, I'm endlessly grateful for all of life's blessings. For my Democratic colleagues whose courage and commitment with the support of your families have made many of these accomplishments possible. In fact, could not have been done without you. For my dear husband, Paul, who has been my beloved partner in life and my pillar of support, thank you. We're all grateful for all the prayers and well wishes as he continues his recovery. Thank you so much. For our darling children, Nancy, Corinne, Christine, Jacqueline, Paul, and Alexandra, and our grandchildren, Alexander and Madeline, Liam, Sean, and Ryan, Paul and Thomas, Bella and Octavio, they are the joys of our lives for whom and we are so very, very proud of them and a comfort to us at this time. and for my brilliant, dedicated, and patriotic staff under the leadership of Terry McCullough, working together, the finest group of public servants the House has ever known. Thank you all so much. And again, for those who sent me here, for the people of San Francisco, for entrusting me with the high honor of being their voice in Congress. In this continued work, I will strive to honor the call of the patron saint of our city, St. Francis. Lord, make me an instrument of thy peace. In this house, we begin each day with a prayer and a pledge to the flag. And every day, I am in awe of the majestic miracle that is American democracy. As we participate in a hallmark of our republic, the peaceful, orderly transition from one Congress to the next, let us consider the words of, again, President Lincoln, spoken during one of America's darkest hours. He called upon us to come together, to swell the chorus of the Union, when once again touched, as surely they will be, by the better angels of our nature. That again is the task at hand. A new day is dawning on the horizon, and I look forward, always forward, to the unfolding story of our nation, a story of light and love, of patriotism and progress, of many becoming one, and always an unfinished mission to make the dreams of today the reality of tomorrow. Thank you all. May God bless you and your families, and may God continue to bless our veterans and the United States of America. Thank you all so much.